Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I am out in the torch shop. Today's another marble day, and I'm mostly going to be trying to work on some fume techniques, gold and silver. So we'll go over that a little bit, but we're going to just start off with our main construction rod here and get into it. So I'm going to try and do a little different pattern of covering the gold and the fume, and do that in some successive layers. I do this a lot of times. I've done one fairly recently where I do lines and twist that a little bit. Do lines, straight lines, twist, straight lines, twist. So I've done that multiple layers of fuming. Did one fairly recently, but this one is going to be a little different pattern, something that I haven't done exactly before. Always looking for different ways to incorporate fuming into these marbles, because it's just a really great way to add color and reflections and depth and all kinds of silliness going on the inside. So just clean off the end of this rod here, and we'll start condensing this back. So we want to start off with the gather and get our cone shape to start with. I'm just going to just show a little bit, when I get silver, I'll get it just in these, just get an ounce in a bar. I've gotten it coins. If you get coins in gold and silver, you need to really make sure it's pure. Not all of it is. And then gold, this is only like a half a gram or less, but I get these little squares of 999.9 gold, and I get this stuff. A lot of times I just buy things like that on eBay just because there's a lot of it on there. I know what I'm paying right out the gate with the shipping cost and everything. And then when I cut that stuff, I'll use these like flush cutters. I used to use these in electronics a lot. I picked this pair up at Harbor Freight, I think. But these guys can cut that stuff. I have broken a pair of these before, just trying to chew off more than I can chew. And then the gold, I'll cut that into little slices, and then cut that into little chunks. So you can quite see in there, but there's just little itty bitty squares of gold. And then these tweezers, I have one pair of tweezers that I try and keep for this use. It looks like these have been heated up in the flame at some point, but some real fine tip tweezers to help manipulate these itty bitty pieces of gold. The silver's not a big deal. And then on my main paddle that I use, I can catch that in the light, on the corner of this thing, I don't know if you can see that, but right in the corner, I've just gouged out a couple little spots in there. And most of the times if you have a little cut square or a little piece of silver or gold, I put it on the paddle, put it right underneath the flame to heat it up, and then the silver just goes on the end of a clear rod, the gold goes on the end of a clear rod with some cobalt on the end. The cobalt works better with the gold. But if you get a little BB of particularly gold, sometimes it bounces off of the rod that's holding it, and that little indent in the paddle gives me some place to put that, a little BB of gold or silver, so it doesn't just roll around and fall off the paddle. So just a real shallow little pocket on that graphite to hold that little speck of metal. Seems to work for me. I try and keep that one pair of tweezers. That's the only thing I use it for, and you know, get a really sharp pair of tweezers for that operation. And then to see what I'm doing, you know, I've gotta have these kind of magnifying visors. A way to really see what you're doing, cutting that gold into little pieces. So I had a question about, you know, where do I get that gold and silver and stuff like that, and how much does it cost? And it's like, well, you buy the gold by the gram and the silver by the ounce. You know, gold is pretty expensive these days, but when you really think about the quantity that goes into an individual piece, depends on what kind of work you're doing, I guess, but the amount of money that you're really investing in that is very, very small amount. I think I kind of covered some of the basic things, because, you know, people were asking how I store that, you know, and that gold. These are these little round gem display case things. These are pretty generic little deal. I don't know how you buy one of them. You buy them by the enough to fill a whole tray of a couple dozen for a display, but you probably pick those up at a rock shop or a coin, someplace that deals with metals and coins and stuff. Okay, just keep gathering this back a little bit. And visualize how big of a gather I need to do this, and then as it pushes back, it starts getting this kind of buildup of the outer skin of the glass, and it has certain impurities or just dissimilar characteristics of the stuff on the surface. Kind of peel some of that off. And in the process, then I add other problems of bubbles and stuff. I need to get rid of that. Okay, that looks like a fair amount of glass there. Get that to stop wandering around. Out onto this end, and then we'll start defining the starting cone shape. I'm kind of trying to sharpen this point. I don't need to worry about that too much. Flame polish this off, kind of make sure that face is good and clean so it'll accept the fume. Start off, let's see, we'll start off by making points. Okay, so I've got a little pokey tool. This is just a 1/16 inch stainless steel welding rod, welding wire. And in order to do this pattern, I thought, well, I'll do some locate points on here. Okay, well, it's kind of hard to get the exact locations that I want, but got 4 going around here apparently. There'll be some others kind of splitting the difference there. We're going to do some little ones out here on the end. Okay, so now we got kind of a dot pattern laid out. Try to introduce this gold carefully and let it warm up by the side of the flame and down onto one of these points. Alright, get some gold on there. Now we are going to add some clears. So this is just going to be a buildup of dots. Some water on there. Now with the base glass fairly cool and that gold on there, it will have a tendency to act as a kind of a barrier, and sometimes it can just pull the glass right off of there that you're adding on. So I want to make sure what you put down is good and hot. So like that one right there, it just didn't stick at all. Alright, I'm going to heat those in. Oh, I missed one. Oopsie. So this is going to be a multi-step process. So I'll just alternate between gold and silver. And with each phase I'm going to be melting in, trapping a dot, trapping a little bubble. Okay, I don't necessarily need to melt it all the way in. I wish there was a magical way to clock these exactingly, but I'm not trying to make this super perfect. And then we're going to do just a little bit of silver. Which is a little tricky. I played around trying to visualize what this pattern was going to end up looking like. And it's kind of difficult for me to, there's a lot of variables happening in how much you melt in each one of these layers and how big of a dot of clear you put on top. So I'm really not clear how this is going to look. That's the whole point of trying it. Try something different. And I figured these little pokey spots would help me visualize. Sometimes it's really hard to see adding fume on top of fume. I feel like you're running a little bit blind on where the location is at. Okay, well, we're getting going. cup full of marbles to give me ideas and inspiration. I also sort of contemplated the difference between having this be a conical start point or a rounded start point and then making it conical. So I'm going to start out with this with it conical, and as I do these layers, I'm not sure I really want to try and force it back to the cone shape in between these layers. I'm just going to keep adding these. Okay, now when you're doing gold, you kind of want the glass to be a little cooler. Or it just can't, if the glass you're putting the gold onto is too hot, it just keeps burning off. The flame just keeps evaporating off the glass, the gold. And it doesn't really get much opportunity to stick. Okay. And gold has a tendency to kind of submarine into the cobalt. So when you're done fuming, sometimes I want to kind of push it on the marble plate a little bit or something to get it to squeeze that gold out. The trouble is, you're too aggressive with that, it'll pop that gold out and send it rolling around on your table. Shoot, I didn't do my little indents. Well, this will be interesting. Supposed to do this before I fumed it. Well, hopefully that's enough. Enough of a dimple. Yeah. A little goofed up there, but just trying to remember. Need somebody out there to remind me what I'm doing. It's one thing about going off into uncharted territory is I'm doing things that isn't something I've done a whole bunch of and familiar with the progress. I think I added some randomness to this. Make up for it by doing deeper dimples on this layer. Multiple dimples. Okay, then we're going to fume with silver. I have a hard time keeping this straight, what my pattern is that I'm trying to do. A little bit of silver. Little or a lot, depends on how you look at it. I've got pretty significant silver on there, probably more than I had hoped for, but dump up that oxygen to burn out the extra silver in there. Okay, we're going to do one more with gold. Call it good for this experiment. Okay, gold again. So adjusting the torch for the silver and gold is an important step, and I have a hard time really telling anybody how to do it, except that gold needs slightly oxidizing and silver needs slightly reducing. That's sort of the general rule. But your mileage may vary. A lot depends on what kind of torch you've got going on. Okay, well that's enough of that silly dot pattern. So we can heat this all in and then get this towards a cone shape. So we want to melt this down until it's kind of smoothed out and build up some heat base. So we want that interior to all move. So ideally, heat the whole thing up all the way into the core. Let the surface chill just a bit, and we'll very gently start forming this up. Do that in consecutive stages. As that surface chills, we can apply more pressure. Trying to kind of repeat the same concept, trying to heat it all the way in to build up a heat base inside. Come out of the heat, start off really gentle, chill that surface, and start applying some more pressure. kind of reverse the rotation on the marver here. Okay, we're getting pretty close. We can get a little more aggressive. Alright, now we're going to do some backing. We're going to do layer of frit, some blue spruce, get this surface good and hot to do a pickup. Focus heat on the thicker area. Okay, the idea here was just to pick up a little bit. Alright, before that heat loses all its base, we're going to heat up the tip here. Sharpen that point. Okay, now next layer. Just had a thought whether I want to do any fume against that background, but I don't think so. That's going to confuse things. So now we've got some dark amethyst. We'll go ahead and build up the background. Like Amethyst is sort of an interesting backing color. It's not opaque, but it does present a dark background. And it fumes well. So on this back side we'll gold fume it before we do our casing and our fill glass, and then our background colors. Backside colors. I always say backgrounds, not backside. You're not going to see those colors from the inside. I have enough of the stringer pulled out to do this job. Back up here to where I started pulling it out with a gap. And just kind of adding some more on here randomly. Okay, got a layer of color on there. Pause for a second here. Alright. Now, hold on there. Let's see if we can get some gold going on the backside. And that helps give the effect of a barrier, a separation between the inside and the outside. Start out here on the tip and make sure we don't cover the actual tip. It's been that way for quite a while. I could reposition that camera a little bit. I just was noticing as I'm doing this, I've done it so much, but I do play a bit of a tug-of-war. I'm pulling away as I'm trying to drag that, and then I'm really pushing in. So I'm pulling away, pushing in. And this makes a real pretty reflective surface that's kind of underneath the floating lines of color that I add next. First I got to build up this clear to make it more or less round. So after that first layer, I like to heat this in. help kind of define the ends here. So kind of go around the perimeter and then kind of fold it back over to the right, and then we'll go on to this end point and try and push it back over to the left. Trying to build up our mass at this point to fill in. This step here will have a considerable gauge on the end size of the marble. You can do this a little bit or a lot, and it'll affect the apparent vortex depth and scale. So really kind of influencing the optics in this phase. Although it doesn't seem very obvious. Doesn't have to be pretty at this phase. And once we got enough mass added on, we'll just melt all that in and get that rounded up. Don't usually worry too much about small bubbles in this mix here, but it's an opportunity to pull some bubbles out. Sometimes they're deeper in there than it would seem. Bottom end, you can get that kind of heated up and angle it down a little bit and get that point to draw out. This is another little trick to getting the focal point a little tighter. Now we have to kind of counter that step of elongating it with condensing it back. Trying to kind of ignore the wobbles there and just think about the end point. It's okay if it goes through some stages of its development where it's pretty asymmetric or something weird's going on. It'll get there. So I've got 3 colors to put on the back side. Let's start out with what is this? Peacock Chameleon. I kind of want these lines spaced out, give a little bit of a gap there so we can see into that reflective core. And then we've got some Atlantis Sparkle. I think I used this last week. One of these sparkle colors I've just kind of got in inventory, a little bit of it from a long time ago, and haven't really used it much. Some of those kind of funky, it's not really blue, it's not really green, greenish. And it's somewhat translucent, so that reflective gold layer will shine up through this to some degree. And then this is some glass that I've had around for a long time. Apparently this is North Star Paris Green, which was kind of I guess an experimental glass. I'm not sure when I bought it if it was really labeled as experimental or what it was. But it's apparently from quite a few years back. I couldn't get a whole lot of information about it. But this is a transparent green. Nice, pretty gemmy green. And it probably has copper in it. And they probably didn't keep making it because they couldn't control the reduction of the copper into making some red streaks or whatever, and so we'll see how it works on the back side here. If it produces some weird reactions or red stuff, it doesn't really matter. It'll be interesting whatever it does. Got out here fairly early today, and outside temperature is not very warm yet, but getting plenty toasty in here. Good old Montana. We're supposed to get down, well, it's supposed to rain a whole bunch the next couple days, and it might get pretty well, not really cold, but up in the mountains they're talking about some snow. We're kind of in the mountains. Hopefully it stays above our heads. We started some corn in the greenhouse, and it got pretty tall, some of it, and we planted it out the other day, and I'm hoping it doesn't get rained on too hard or get too cold to make it grumpy. Should be alright. More worried about the rain. If we really get a whole inch of rain or something, that could be a bit more than what corn likes. But just yesterday I felt like I was frantic after I mowed the place. I was running around trying to water everything. It seemed really dry. Okay, we got these colors melted in, and we got to let that settle in for a minute. There's always something here. Weather's always doing something. But not too extreme. We get pretty mild. Really, when there's crazy weather all over, we don't get it all that bad. Got one of my little plates over on the other bench. I should have brought it over here. Okay, Try and rake this in. A little bit of a break there. Tries to break open some seams or a little patch. We'll go back in and smooth that together. It were easy, everybody would do it, right? Okay, a trusty butter knife that I've had for 30 plus years in the torch shop. Okay. And sometimes we can kind of angle this end in, just that, try and leave the point alone, but kind of angle some of that glass back up away from that end. Just resting it on the edge on the bottom rather than squishing it in there. I'm just trying to let it kind of set in there. Alright, now we're going to have to let that settle down for a minute. I need my other fan going. And it managed to get most of the wobble out of there. Hard to say how that happens. It's just a lot of angles and heat and manipulations and trying to get things to kind of move back on axis. Looking for some solid fusion here. Overhead cameras, it must have gotten bonked. Seems like it's way out of position and out of focus. Apologize for that. add a little bit more glass onto the top of this. Alright, we're going to use our roller. Yeah, start peeling off this edge. So we're kind of defining the transition line between the color and the clear, and also trying to skim off some glass on the surface here that's got dregs of fuming and stress and whatnot. Meanwhile, my hand holding the punchy is getting sweaty and it's harder to control. Okay, and we got this tail end, we have to kind of pull out a little bit, and as you break that away in the flame, try and get out the outer flame so you don't get that glass boiling too much. You can see a whole bunch of messy glass there. Okay. Kind of reposition our angle here. Alright. Do some more slow rotations if you can, as long as that pumpy is stable. If they're slow like this, the heat soaks in there a lot faster. Then, I've got a lot of heat base, I want to spin this up a little bit. Trip around the marble mold and get pretty close there. I'll do that again just to show what I was doing. I couldn't see it in the other camera view. Okay. Look inside there. Just the one thing you just can't see when you're making it is the colors, what they're going to look like. Okay, gotta get this backside shaped up. Got lots of heat base in there, and I'll spin this up. Come into the marble mold kind of level. Okay, we're going to go into the marble mold level and come up. Use some pressure. Getting there. Okay, it's doing pretty good, so we're gonna give this might be spinning the marble mold, and then so kind of cooling down the core. And this is essentially flame polishing. Very slow and intense. Colors are all behaving quite nicely. A bit too hot on the surface. And sometimes you can tell in the reflections. The reflections will look a little hazy, and then they'll get kind of sharper as that glass gets smoothed out and flame polished. Okay, keep rotating. We're kind of come out and wait till we can transfer. You get down to this last bit, and you don't want the marble too hot, or it's going to lose its shape. It wasn't really the best touchdown on that puntty just now. The puntty itself was a little too hot, but we'll clean it up if we need to. When we talk about cleanup, this is a spot where we want to make sure we get rid of all of that funky grass. It means we have to kind of gouge into the lens there a little bit. There's 90% there on the shape. So at this stage, we don't want a lot of heat into the heat base. Clear glass moves pretty easily without as much heat. So we want to just get this front face pretty hot. Rotate the same direction, at least initially. You know, don't go back and forth, you'll make wrinkles. The very, very front is a little flat. So I'm trying to kind of hang this. Getting distracted and losing our puntty. Okay, so the shape is there, it's filled out the marble mold. I can see wrinkles all the way out to the tip, which tells me it was touching the mold. So you just need to flame out those wrinkles. And that's basically it. And we're going to let this cool and then hit one more cycle with the heat. We've got some nice reflections coming off of that gold fume layer underneath. Okay, one more intense heat. Especially on that very end face. That should do it. So keep rotating, don't stop rotating. So this next step of getting the puntty off, you know, the colder the puntty is, the easier it's going to break. So you could let it sit here and cool down for a little while. You do want it to kind of stop feeling like it's glowing too much, and then that fumer's got some nice reflections inside there. Okay. Wet tweezers. And it's kind of off center from the pattern that's drawn on the back. It's not centered up on the point where I raked, but it's clear glass with enough heat to smooth it in. check out those reflections around the bend. And we got her done. Well, this might not be the most amazing marble build I've ever done, but I think it's pretty cool. It'll be something different. That's the whole point of all this, trying to find something different, and I can go back through things and find what's a favorite. Make more of those. Okay, we're going into the kiln. Another happy annealing session. We'll find out tomorrow what we've got. You'll find out here in just a second. You guys all take care of yourselves, take care of those around you, and we are so appreciative of you watching any of these videos, and we hope to see you back here again for another marble adventure. But in the meantime, be kind. See you next time.